Welcome to this tutorial of the BonaFide Prefab Painter's asset sets and categories. When you download this package from the asset store, you will get some example sets and categories included in the package, but here I will show you how you create them from scratch. So to begin with, select a folder and we go to Create, BonaFide Prefab Painter, Category. We'll have to name the asset and then we will give it a display name. We can give it a shortcut key if we want to. I will just put E here. The category works by grouping assets together. So to get started, we will create a new asset group. We will name it Props. And to add an asset, we can either do it directly from a prefab or we can create an empty asset. The simplest solution is simply to create an asset from a prefab by pressing the button, picking a prefab, and we're done. By default, they will randomize along the y-axis and they will scale 1. We can add a few more prefabs in the same manner. And they will all use the default behavior. Assets also support something called variants, which is basically the same asset using different prefabs. So with this chopping block here, we can open the variants and add a new variant, and we can have the same chopping block but here without the axe. When replacing this asset, it will randomize between these two prefabs. We will now create a new group called Trees, and once again add asset from prefab, and select this small pine tree. If you are painting a forest of trees, you probably want to scale the trees a bit differently to remove the uniformity of it. So press this drop down, random single axis, and I will go for 0.8 and 1.2. This means every item placed from this tree will be randomly scaled between 0.8 and 1.2 in every axis. You can also scale them randomly along each axis by instead selecting separate axis. We can now create a new tree. And once again add additional variants. And once again scale them randomly. And the same for this bush asset. These are the most common settings you need to change when creating assets, but I will now show you the more advanced settings. So we'll create a new group again and add an asset. If you open this Advanced Options folder, you will find new settings for the asset. For example, the spacing factor, which individually sets the spacing between the assets when you're painting them. The collider factor, which means that you can have overlap that is less than the full size of the collider. If you use the multiply prefab scale option, it means that when you're placing an item, it will also take the scale of the prefab into consideration when scaling the item. Use prefab rotation does what it says, it rotates the asset according to the prefab rotation. The use prefab height option means that when you're placing an item, it will take the prefab's Y position into consideration when placing the item. Individual ground height means that when placing several items, it will be a ray cast down to the ground that makes sure that everyone sticks to the ground. Allow collisions means that objects are allowed to collide. And the item naming options change how the item placed in the world will be named. Use item name means that it will have the name of the asset, and use prefab name means that it will get the name of the prefab. So, these are all the options in the categories. We will now create an asset set instead. So we can create a new asset by going to Create, BonaFide Prefab Painter, Asset Set. An example set is basically just a collection categories that goes together. So we can drag in the example category, and then we will create a new category, and we will add that one as well. So now when we're opening the tool, from Window, BonaFide Prefab Painter, we need to select a category. We can either select the example category we made, and we need to select something to place against. And here you can see all the items we created grouped together in the groups we made. And if I want to create a tree, you will see that it randomizes between the 3 different trees. That is even more obvious with the chopping block we made that sometimes have an axe in it and sometimes doesn't. If we instead select the asset set we created up here, we will now have a drop down with the category, so we can easily change between the different categories we have. So, that is how you set up asset sets and asset categories in the BonaFide Prefab Painter.